We designed the module on empathy so that it feeds very well into sense making. So the exercise that you did around your empathy map will now inform this next section, which is about trying to understand if there's any primary user groups that you've learned about from your research. And one of the things that we create whenever we do research is a profile. For each person that we talk to, in this case Vito, we may have very specific background to who they are and captured that. How old is he? Does he have a health condition? And then there might be a great quote that encapsulates kind of who he is as a person. This is called a profile. A profile is a snapshot of an existing person that was a participant in your research. A persona is a fictionalized sort of aggregation. So this example on the right was research done by Doblin a number of years ago around refrigerated baked goods, and the team came up with 3 different personas. Occasionals, people that don't bake very often, and when they do, it's more or less a special holiday. So they're the practicals that this may really be a staple for them. Maybe they have this 2 or 3 times a week. Aficionados are people who may just use this as a raw ingredient, like they're making chicken pot pies and whole new creations sort of based on using the dough as a raw ingredient in whatever it is they're trying to make. Each one of these people tells us something differently about how we might message to them, how we might build a different type of relationship with them, and even how we might design our product to suit their individualized needs. So as we use these different words, profiles being the actual person that you've talked to, and then the persona being this archetype that we design for, what we're going to do in this section of sense making is start to create our own personas based on the research that you've done and the understanding that you've built. This example of a persona is taken from research on wearables, and this is the type of person that's using a wearable, smartwatch, as an extension of their computer. They have key needs because of the way that they're using their product. They have a desired form. What are some of the different features and functions they need it to have? And then what is the bridge that you would build to them for this product? And then here's some examples of a couple people that we interviewed and what they like about the different products that they're using. So as we think about what we would design for the next generation of smartwatch, we say for the taskmaster, we have a deeper understanding of what they need. Another group from this very same body of research are the fitness first people. So the fitness first people really don't care about connecting to their computer for day-to-day work tasks or social tasks, but what they do care about is activity tracking. So they want to know how many steps they did, they want to know how they're mapping today versus last week versus last month. They may be tracking goals. So how do we give them the next set of features or functions based on who they are, and how do we market to them, and how do we design a different type of smartwatch for this type of user? And that's how we want to use personas, is kind of this beacon of this personality type that we want to design for. And the fitness person is substantially different from the person who's using their smartwatch as an extension of their computer. So what is a persona? It's a fictional character based upon your research. Now, if you didn't have time or energy, like sometimes on Agile teams, they'll just brainstorm personas. The best case scenario is to do it directly from research that you've done recently, because if you researched wearable devices 5 years ago, it's really not going to be too helpful in what people are doing today. So hopefully it's based on more recent research. And even with this project, we didn't talk to 50 people. We talked to 7 people. And even within those 7, we recruited people that were using their smartwatches in different ways, and then we did secondary research to know that this was a viable trend. So there are these fictional characters that represent different user types in the way that they relate to your product, service, system, or business. And it should include, when you create a persona, sort of critical elements for each user group. Some of their needs, some of their specific behaviors, attitudes and opinions they may have around that product or service, and then attributes from your empathy map. So what did they think, feel, say, do? What were some of their pains and gains? Why are they important? They're important because They help designers sort of step out of themselves and into the shoes of the end users. We can't be everyone, so I am not a 20-year-old male. It's really hard for me to know exactly how they use their smart watches to track all of their Slack teams. They align the team and clarify the process. So that helps guide ideation and say, okay, now let's brainstorm around the fitness first user and around their needs and their drivers. Then you can have a sort of separate ideation session around the person that's using their smartwatch as an extension of the computer. When you're ideating with personas, keep the following in mind. You're spending time generating concepts for each of the separate personas. You want to address not only the needs of each persona type, but some of the channels they may use to interact with your offering. Personas that we created a number of years ago for the car and home insurance space, the personas were really based on people that are DIY, who want to go online, they don't want to talk to an agent, they want to just buy their own insurance, they understand the variables, they understand what the different categories are, they understand the product pretty confidently. Those are the DIYers. On the other end of the spectrum, for that particular industry, you might have the relationship seekers. And these are the people who want to talk to an agent. If they have an issue, they definitely want a human being that they've met before that's going to help them out, and they want the advice of that person when they're selecting the product. So those are kind of two ends of the spectrum that we researched and learned more about, and then we created personas that reflect these different ends of the spectrum versus, people that want to do things themselves versus those that want to have another human being help them in the process. So think about channels as well, and then discuss if some personas should be prioritized over others. So as you think about who your personas are, also think about who's most relevant for the business that you're in. Now you're going to create a persona based on your research that's relevant to the project that you're doing. First, you want their name and a role. Create a catchy label, so it doesn't have to be that fancy. Like I said, we had DIYer versus relationship seeker, but it's something that tells you immediately like what kind of person that is. So whenever you see personas and it's like Linda, I don't like the ones that are just around someone's name because they don't really tell me who Linda is. So I'd rather see that Linda is a fitness first person or a relationship seeker, because that's what I'm going to remember. So it could be around their role, and it's something easy and memorable that helps other people understand who this persona is. Then bring in some photos, and those photos usually will have like a profile, a photograph of the person that's a bit more sort of focused, like a portrait, and then an activity, some behavior that they're engaged in, or some other image that talks about an important characteristic that helps understand who this is, that helps you understand who this persona is, and then a little bit more biographical or other types of information that tells you a bit more about that person as an individual. Can be demographic. If you, for instance, fitness first tended to skew a little more female than male, there are still a lot of guys using smartwatches as fitness trackers, but maybe it was 60-40 in the breakdown. If that's something that you can start to think about and quantify, you could add that. Is this group more suburban or urban? Anything that stands out as something specific to that user group. Also their level of expertise. Are they a power user, or are they just beginning to understand a new technology? There may be some differentiating factors that come in as being important around the level of expertise that this person has. And then maybe how frequently they use the product or service. And so how does that impact who you want to target as your end user and who you might want to generate concepts for? Then the gains and the pains. And you should have already captured this in your empathy map. But what motivates or delights this user group? What are their goals, frustrations? Are there any common pain points that this particular group has? And then how do these inform opportunity areas? So you want to say, well, these opportunity areas are some of the ones that we really want to focus on when we start generating concepts. The last area is context. So anything that helps the design team understand the context in which this person works, lives, Say something like wearables played a role both at home and at work. And so you might want to look at both of those elements as you think about building out your persona. So this includes key needs and activities relevant to that particular group. Any direct quotes that illustrate kind of what they think or feel. So you should be able to pull that from your empathy map. A lot of times we'll create charts or diagrams that also visualize how these people are different. So for motivations, you could have things like fear versus power or sort of social connection. Even though we're showing sort of general quantitative measurement, just know that it's still based on qualitative data. These are areas that you could then go after in a more quantitative context and do a survey with particular user groups to start to say, what percentage of the people are really driven by fear versus power. Another area might be preferred channels. So we talked before about looking at people in the insurance industry and how critically important it was for us to think about those people that are going online and using that as a primary way of interacting with the company versus those who, the minute anything happens, they pick up the phone and call their broker. So what does that mean for how people are interacting with your product, service, or system? Look at all of your research now and create a couple different personas. As you create a couple of different personas, you'll be able to use those when you get to the concept generation module.